Hello, everybody. This is Matt Heisey with the College Funding Connection, and today we're going to be taking a look at some numbers for Washington University. So, if you found us, you probably were checking on Google or one of the other places where we have some of our videos or information. And we're doing a series of videos on various colleges and universities, and in this case, we're going to be looking at Washington University in St. Louis in a little bit more detail. So, we believe as a company, it's very important for families to kind of get a preview as far in advance as possible of what kind of financial aid they might be getting at a particular school. And always keep in mind that every school can be different. So just because your EFC or your family contribution might be a certain number does not necessarily mean that's going to be the number that the college is going to be working with ultimately and awarding you 100% financial aid. So we're going to take a look at that here in just a second. If you're not familiar with our company, again, the College Funding Connection, we're headquartered in Northeast Ohio, but we actually work with clients all over the United States. And there is our website right below at collegefc.com. So I thought we could start by just looking at what we call the foundation for effective college planning. And the first step really is looking at your family's EFC that I mentioned earlier. And the EFC, also called the expected family contribution, and simply put, this is the portion of your family's income and assets that you'll be expected to contribute towards the costs of college. EFC number is always going to be the same. Every college will start with that number, and it's actually the product of a mathematical formula that is used by the Department of Education through the FAFSA application process. And if you're applying for financial aid for college, depending on if you're looking at a public school or private school, everyone pretty much uses the FAFSA, which is through the Department of Education. And FAFSA is just an acronym for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And then the private schools can use some other private application processes. The most commonly used one is the CSS profile application through the College Board. Many schools use this. I think there's about 275 colleges that use it now. And then there's a smaller group of schools, and these are more of the larger, probably more competitive private universities, use something called the consensus, where they've agreed to follow a certain process in evaluating financial aid for a family. So in any case, it's based on the time period from January of the student's junior year of high school, through December of their senior year of high school, and this is known as their base year. So if you're just getting into this for the first time, your first student in college, and they're still in high school, it's really that full tax year prior to applying for financial aid that the colleges will be looking at pretty closely. And then the math is pretty simple. What we're going to be looking at then is the financial need for your family. And that's determined by taking the cost of attendance for the school. So these are all the costs added up for a particular college. Subtracting out your family's EFC, we already talked about that, the expected family contribution, equals the financial need. And that is kind of a starting point for the colleges. Some colleges cover 100% of your financial need, and some cover very little. So this is where you want to have a preview and have some idea of what to expect at a particular college. So let's take a look at the numbers specifically for Washington University. So we're going to be using one of the calculators that we use called Smart Search. And this is a program that's used by financial professionals to run more specific estimates. It's not something, by the way, that you're going to be able to find on Google and have access to yourself. It's a program used by a lot of professionals that do college financial aid planning. But we're going to go right down the line. You can see the tabs here at the top, everything from academics to family resources and information. Then we're going to be selecting some colleges down here. And I've already pre-filled some of the fields here to save us a little bit of time. But we're going to be looking at Joey's sample. He's part of the sample family today. And starting with Joey's academics, and you probably all know that there's a couple of different tests that a student can take. In this case, we're going to be looking at the ACT, but we could also use the SAT scores. And Joey did pretty well. He scored a 29 on the ACT. Grade point average is 4.0, so he's a very good student. And then his class rank is in the top 10%, so we just say 10 out of 100. Some colleges look at that and some don't, but they're certainly going to look at test scores and grade point average. So next we're going to take a look at Joey's family. So he's an only child, so no other dependents besides Joey, but if you're in your family, if you have more than one child at home, and especially if you have more than one child in college, that can make a big difference for you for financial aid. So you want to make sure that you're answering those questions correctly. And by the way, what we're doing is kind of following some of the key questions on the FAFSA. That's why we're filling in these particular fields. Right at the top, if you have any type of background here, if your family is Hispanic, Native American, African American, you can select yes in this category, and sometimes that can lead to some additional financial aid if you're part of a particular ethnic or cultural group. State where you live. We live in Ohio here, so I just used Ohio, but we can pretty much pick any state in the country. We then look at the age of the oldest parent. And keep in mind, and this is something that a lot of parents have a hard time grasping, but your kids are tied to you financially in many other ways during those undergraduate college years. So this is during their baccalaureate years for college, because the schools and the FAFSA calculations are closely tied to family income and assets, not just the student. And a lot of times parents have a hard time putting their personal information on the FAFSA application, but it is a federal document, very similar to IRS forms, so you do have to list your information along with your students. So they are going to look at mom and dad's age, and I already mentioned dependents and some of the additional information there as well. But here's where we get into some of the specific information for mom and dad, and this is parents' finances. So we're going to be tracking, or FAFSA will be tracking parents' income, how you're filing taxes. So in this case, they're filing jointly. Both of Joey's parents are working. And their income's about $100,000 per year, so we already keyed that in. And then we get down to the assets, and this is something that the colleges will be looking at pretty closely. So kind of a backstory here. Mrs. Sample's dad passed away a couple years ago, so this is Grandpa, leaving his daughter and his grandson some money. And his daughter, he left a couple $100,000. So they didn't know what to do with this, so they just put it into a savings account. So right now they have $200,000 sitting in a money market account right now. The colleges will also sometimes look at home equity, so we do have to keep track of that. In this case, they have about $50,000 in home equity since they paid down their mortgage. Other assets they might count are business assets. In this case, the Samples are contributing to their 401k plan at work, so we do track the contribution here. And there are some other things that might be looked at here too, but for now, that's all we're going to take a look at. And then for Joey's Sample, they'll also, as a student, look at his income and assets. And there is a little bit here. So Grandpa did leave Joey about $20,000 from his estate, so there's about $20,000 sitting in a savings account again, and they're just keeping it there for college for Joey. And then Mom and Dad started a 529 plan in Joey's name, so he has about $20,000 sitting there in a college savings account. Now the next couple of sections we'll kind of skip through quickly, but if we're working with a family and they're not exactly sure what kind of college they can afford or budgeting for college, it's very important because you want to look and really focus in on colleges or universities that are going to fit your family's budget. So we look at affordability for college because, let's face it, if your budget is $15,000 or $20,000 or less than that for college, and Joey's focusing on colleges where you know 2 years ahead of time they're going to be asking you to come up with $30,000 a year, and you don't want to get into that much debt, then why look at those schools if it's unlikely that it's going to be affordable for your family? Now, we can always hold out hope for merit scholarships, but we know a relatively small percentage of students get any sizable merit scholarships, especially at very competitive private schools. So affordability is one of those things we have to look at. Search options, then, we can use this tab for identifying more relevant choices. We can pick schools in pretty much any state in the country, focusing in on particular states. How likely is it that the student's going to be offered a position at that school? So those are some things we can look at. But today we know what we're looking for because we already mentioned that we're looking at Washington University in St. Louis. So I added WashU to the list. We can see all kinds of other colleges we can include here. And we have numbers on pretty much every major college or university in the United States, so we can run those numbers. And then just for comparison's sake, I'm going to throw Rice University in there from Texas so we can see what it looks like, and we're going to save this and take a look at the numbers. And it does pull up the report for us pretty quickly. So here we can see in basically a couple rows, Washington University and then Rice University for comparison's sake. So right off the bat, we see it's a pretty difficult school to get into. So it doesn't mean Joey doesn't have a chance of getting in, but we know it's going to be very competitive based on his academics and his academic credentials. So we then look at the EFC method, which, remember, is the expected family contribution method. And both of these schools use FAFSA, but they also use the institutional method, which is just another name for CSS profiles. And that does change things a little bit because the profiles numbers can come out to be a little different than FAFSA. Cost of attendance is similar, but there's a difference here. WashU is about $59,000 per year, so they're one of the more expensive universities in the country. And then Rice University is about $47,000 currently. The family's expected family contribution, their EFC, is about $34,000 right now based on their income and assets. So we're going to see if we can bring that down at all. So that means that the family's need is about $25,000 for WashU, and then about $12,000 or $13,000 for Rice. And they both meet about the same amount of financial aid, 99% and 100%. And then the estimated aid here for WashU is about $27,000. Remember, we're going to take the cost of attendance, which is about $59,322, subtract out the EFC. It's going to show us about how much aid the school will cover. So that shows us that they're eligible, or Joey would be eligible for about $27,000. But it still leaves a net cost of $32,315 for Washington University. I think we can bring that number down a little bit. So we're going to go back, and then there's some other planning questions we answer down here, but we won't get into some detail with that today. So I'm going to go back here and work a little financial magic here for the sample family. We're right away going to go to the parents' finances, because something I noticed when I was meeting with the sample family was this $200,000 that Grandpa Sample left his daughter. So it's sitting in Mrs. Sample's savings account right now. The schools are going to look at that. It's going to be a really bright red flag for the schools as an amount there that's available for college. Now, granted, they may want to be planning on spending some of that money for college expenses, but you don't want the colleges to know that. So is there a way to take this and reduce it from $200,000 down to, let's say, $20,000 in that account? Now, I'm certainly not suggesting that you go and blow $180,000 and spend it on a Maserati or something. That'd be a bad idea. But it is very possible to take that much money and basically reposition it or shelter it so that the colleges cannot see it and you legally don't have to report it on the FAFSA application. We're not going to be getting into details of how to do that today, but I can assure you that it is very possible to do that. So we're going to reduce that, reposition about $180,000. I'm going to come down here and save that information. Then I'm going to jump over to Joey's information. And remember, Grandpa Sample also left Joey some money, $20,000. Well, I can tell you that $20,000, again, is going to be a red flag to the colleges because all they're going to see is cash there that can be spent for college. Again, now we might be planning on doing that, but we don't necessarily want to share that information with the colleges if we don't have to. And the good news is you don't have to if you plan and reposition finances properly. So we're going to take that 20 and turn it into a 0 by magic. So we've just repositioned that $20,000. We're going to save this. And then we're going to go back here to the colleges and run this report again. Now, if you remember correctly, this net cost over here was $32,000, and we've effectively brought that down by quite a bit. So if we run through the numbers again, Washington University, where the family's net out-of-pocket expense before was $32,000, we've now brought it down to $18,000. So that is in a savings for this family of $14,000 per year, where for undergraduate years, that's about $56,000 that they could probably keep in their pocket rather than just handing it over to the college unnecessarily. Now, we're not doing anything wrong. The college has plenty of money, and you're still going to have to come up with $18,000 or $19,000. But what we're basically doing is taking money that was probably reserved for other expenses or retirement or charitable use at some point, get it out of a column or a category that the colleges are really going to be looking at and assessing very heavily, and repositioning it somewhere where it's perfectly liquid, but not necessarily in a place that the colleges have to count it or will count it. And in the process, we're reducing this family's out-of-pocket expenses by about $56,000 over 4 years. So pretty neat stuff. Very possible if you find that your family's in a similar situation, very easy to do, but it does take some smart planning on your part and then finding a qualified funding advisor that can help you with that. So I'm going to finish up here and then jump over to our PowerPoint presentation again. So like I said, this is very doable for any family that they find that they're in, especially in a lower income. By lower income, I'm meaning 60 to maybe a couple $100,000. But they find that they have a lot of assets because of an inheritance, maybe due to business use or something. And that can create a problem for financial aid. So what we offer for anybody that's attending our workshops, whether it's online or live classes that we do, is a free 1-hour consultation. There is no obligation to you. All we ask is that you be prepared for the meeting so that we can make it productive for you as possible and time efficient for us. But during that workshop, during the consultation following the workshop, we would basically go through a very similar process that I just showed you in that sample case. We'll run the information for you. We'll look at some specific colleges so we can see what it looks like. And if there's anything we can do to help and bring your costs down like we saw for the sample family, we certainly will let you know. And that can oftentimes, like I just showed you, lead to thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars in savings over the course of 4 years or 5 years. So if you are interested, right below our screen here, there's a link to our information page where you can actually request a meeting with us. The website again is collegefc.com and then /contact us. That'll take you right to the Contact Us page, and we can get back to you and schedule a time with you to have that 1-hour consultation. Now, if you do sign up for a consultation, we can also get you on our newsletter list. We do have a free monthly newsletter that's packed with really useful information. And then we can also send you a copy or a link to our free student resource called the Student Roadmap to Success. This is a great resource if you have sophomores, juniors, or seniors in high school. It is a step-by-step guide for them. It's perfectly or absolutely free to them, but very useful if they're in that planning stage during high school years and are college bound. It's a lot of good information to show them what they need to be doing. So thank you very much for watching the video today about Washington University. If we can help, please do fill out the Contact Us page. You can also reach us at 866-305-2321 is our toll-free number. Either way, and be happy to talk with you and schedule a time to meet. Thanks, and good luck with your college plans.